It is my pleasure to introduce today's program, and of course as a historian as well as a former dean who didn't know when to shut up, I want to give you a little background not only on Greg Harris, our speaker, but also on the Art Museum. And particularly because there's a couple of people here who had played a role in preparing ultimately for what we will see, both in terms of the presentation. As you know, after the luncheon, Greg will lead all of us, or those who wish, to walk over to the museum and give us an actual tour of the museum, in addition to this remote view of the museum. First, I want to, my recollection of the 1980s, the important role that Elaine Watson played. Father Richardson, at the time, was concerned about what was happening to the pieces of art within the university, and had asked Elaine to do an inventory. And so Elaine, in her way, did a very careful inventory and obviously discovered a couple things. There were a lot of pieces that were in people's offices, and that over time were viewed by those individuals as sort of their responsibility, permanent responsibility. And so she made it clear that these are university, they were donations to the university, and they were very important to the university. And made sure we had an inventory as well as having a way of securing those pieces that were not exhibited, because we had no exhibit space as such. Then after the university purchased St. Vincent's Grade School, that freed up the opportunity to move the theater school out of McGaw, and it allowed LNS to expand into that far distant east side of the campus, and the opportunity to create some physical space that would become the art museums. So, but mounted to 2 large classrooms, and Simone Zarowski, who was art historian, took responsibility, in addition to her duties as a faculty member, to curate the museum, with now having physical space. And then in 1993, 1994, as we had the opening of the Richardson Library, ultimately space for the museum was found in the library. And with that, Doris Brown is here. As director of the library, she took responsibility for incorporating the museum into the library. And so it was sort of truly a learning resource of the university. And in 1997, under Doris's leadership and pressure, the university appointed the first full-time director of the DePaul Art Collection and the Art Museum. And through that search process that Doris led, Louise Lincoln was brought in to be the director of the museum and the collection. And Louise is now, she's undergoing foot surgery today. She cannot be with us, but it's been Louise's leadership since 1997 that has first increased the size of the museum within the library itself, and then obviously much more recently had overseen the planning and then the construction of the new building, 15,000 square foot building on Fullerton. Louise's background was that she came from the East Coast originally, receiving her undergraduate degree in history from Bryn Mawr, and then her MA in art history from the University of Delaware. Following that, she was in Minnesota, and she became first an assistant curator of a department at the Minnesota Museum of Art, and she was assistant curator of African, Oceanic, and New World collections. And she had moved from her 1977 appointment, sort of part-time, ultimately over a 20-year period, of ultimately becoming the curator of that department at the University of Minnesota. I think because of a professional move of her husband, she arrived in Chicago, and about the time we were seriously looking for the new director, and through Doris's efforts, Louise was brought to DePaul. And so it's been under Louise's leadership that the staff, the collection has greatly expanded, and the professionalizing of all aspects of the collection. And so it's been especially a factor as since 2008, and with the support, interest, enthusiasm of Father Dennis Huschneider, that a decision was made to build a self-standing museum. And if you read some of the articles in the Tribune, it was viewed by the critics as a very important addition to the Chicago art scene and its sort of national reputation. And we have the opportunity today now to hear more about it by Greg Harris. Greg also, he told me, came from out east, so we're importing the culture from the east. But Greg came to Chicago a few years ago and took an undergraduate degree at Columbia in photography, and then went on to do his master's at the School of the Art Institute, also with a specialty history of art, but a specialty in photography. And so about 18 months ago, as the university was planning the new building, Greg was brought onto the staff, and so he has been part of this transformation of the move from the library to the new facility. Greg also teaches a course in history of photography at Columbia, and so it's my pleasure to introduce Greg Harris.